our schedules were very manual. It was Google spreadsheets, emailing it out through Gmail.
There are more ways than ever for identity thieves to steal your information. LifeLock alerts you and works to fix problems with a dedicated restoration specialist. Go to lifelock.com.
Rooster. Good morning, Steve.
Hello, and welcome to the channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well as share. As always, we appreciate you. Today we will be covering the Jewish and Christian prophecy, and possible dates to see if anything matches up with any type of relevant events. There is not doubt that there is a belief in prophecy in both of these beliefs. And we will be looking at as many sources as we can, including but not limited to the Hebrew Bible, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the New Testament. More specifically, we are looking into the prophecy of a prophet and two messiahs. No, you didn't hear that wrong, two messiahs. There are different opinions and interpretations about the second coming of the Messiah, or a whole other Messiah, among Christians and other religious groups. Some people believe that the Bible contains clues and prophecies that point to a specific year or time frame for the return of or the second Messiah, while others think that it is impossible to know the exact date, and that we should always be ready and watchful. I will quote a saying of Jesus, Matthew 24 verse 35 to 36. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven nor the Son except the Father alone. That is not to say that there aren't clues to get us close. We are going to start in the book of Daniel, using all available text and oral traditions. Daniel lived approximate 620 to 538 BC. He was a slave child to King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, according to the book of Daniel, he was favored by God. Daniel pleaded with the chief official to not force him to defile himself with the king's food and wine. The official was too scared at first but was coaxed into a test. The test was to feed Daniel and his group vegetables and water, instead of the king's food of meats and wine for 10 days. Then inspect them and compare them to the others. It came to pass that after only 10 days it was apparent that Daniel and his group were much healthier than the rest. So the official kept Daniel's group eating vegetables. Now Daniel, having favor in God's eyes, became proficient in reading, writing, as well as a gift of understanding and interpreting dreams and visions. After a period the children were presented to King Nebuchadnezzar, and none among all the children did any compare to Daniel's group of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah. So they were stationed in the king's court, and remained until the first year of King Cyrus in approximately 590 BC. Now while Daniel was with King Nebuchadnezzar, the king had a specific dream that troubled his spirit. It was so troubling he could not sleep any longer. The king sent out for all the magicians, the enchanters, sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to come. He then gave each group an ultimatum, in short, either interpret this dream or die. The reply was not what the king wanted to hear, as it was stated there was not a person alive. Only the gods who do not dwell with mortals could answer the question. Daniel, hearing this, went back and informed his companions, and they prayed to their God to unveil the meaning of the king's dream. And that night Daniel had received what he asked for. Daniel went and gave the king, Nebuchadnezzar, his dream and the correct interpretation of the dream. It was a prophecy of the end of the ages and the 4 kingdoms to come. For the sake of time I won't go too deep into details. So the prophecy is known as the 72 weeks prophecy, found in Daniel 9 verses 24 to 27. The prophecy is divided into 3 segments where 1 week equals 7 years. 7 weeks or 49 years, 62 weeks, 434 years, and 1 week the last 7 years. The prophecy begins with the decree to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. That task came true around 457 BC by command of King Artaxerxes. Daniel's prophecy was 490 years from the time the rebuilding of Jerusalem was decreed, which was approximately 457 BC, until the prophet and the first Messiah. 457 minus 490 equals 33 CE/AD. What significant event is written about during this time? How Jesus said this generation, usually interpreted as a 40-year period, would not pass away until these things happened. Well, about the year 70 CE, the Jewish revolt cued the end of an age, especially for the Jews, as the Romans massacred the Jews and making the Jewish apocalypse and prophesy a reality. Now the coming of the second Messiah is 40 jubilees after this destruction. However, 7 years prior to this, there will be many tribulations. So what does the math look like? Well, let's see. If we multiply the 40 times the jubilee, which is 49 years, then we add in the date of 70 CE, the Jewish apocalypse. We come to the year 2030, then subtract the 7 years of tribulations and we get 2023. Well, now this seems a bit interesting. I said when Biden was elected we would have a major event before the end of his term, as it lines up with the same prophetic writings. One of the sources that you might find helpful is a video called Messiah 2030, a prophetic messianic timeline, which claims to have found dozens of biblical prophecies that not only point to the exact year of the Messiah's first coming, 30 CE, but also to the year of his return, 2030 CE. The video explains how these prophecies are based on various patterns, symbols, numbers, and events in the Bible, such as the creation, the Sabbath, the Jubilee, the Exodus, the Temple, the fig tree, and many others. The video also provides timestamps for each prophecy and a summary of its main points. There are also other sources that have different views or criticisms about the 2030 theory, such as Part 2, Messiah 2030 plus Revelation Timeline and Decoding Daniel's 2300 Days 3, Messiah 2030 the Prophetic Messianic Timeline Video Review 4, and 2030 Second Coming. You can explore these sources to get a broader perspective on this topic and compare their arguments and evidence. One source that is relevant is the Lost Gospel, decoding the ancient text that reveals Jesus' marriage to Mary the Magdalene, which is a book that claims to have found evidence that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and had 2 children, based on an ancient manuscript called the Ecclesiastical History of Zacharias Reader. The authors of the book argue that the manuscript contains a hidden story that allegorically encodes the life of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and that they were the founders of a royal dynasty that influenced the history of Europe. You can find more information about this book in this article. Another source that might be relevant to this theory is the Da Vinci Code, which is a novel that explores the possibility that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and had a bloodline that survived until the present day, and that there is a secret society that protects this secret from the Catholic Church. The novel is based on various historical and religious sources, such as the Gnostic Gospels, the Priory of Chaun, and the Knights Templar. The novel also suggests that Mary Magdalene was the Holy Grail, the sacred feminine, and the partner of Jesus in his ministry. Another source, The Second Coming of Christ, The Resurrection of the Christ Within You, which is a book that interprets the teachings of Jesus from a metaphysical perspective and explains how to achieve spiritual enlightenment and union with God. The author of the book does not mention anything about Jesus being married or having children, but he does emphasize the importance of developing both the masculine and feminine aspects of one's soul, and he refers to Mary Magdalene as one of the most advanced disciples of Jesus. There are so many sources and so many theories it is hard to commit to any one. Overall, it is up to you to decide your own interpretation as well as belief. I hope this was informative and educational. Please don't forget to like and share.
and welcome back to the channel. If you're new, don't forget to like and subscribe. Today, we are looking into the possibility of multiple messiahs. If you find this content interesting and wish to help out a channel, there will be a link in the description. Now on to the subject at hand. There is a theory that prophets may have spoken of more than one Messiah. We will start in Isaiah 9 verses 6 and 7. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will be on his shoulders. He is called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. His government will expand, and peace will be endless for the throne of David and his kingdom, to establish it and to sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. This is the Messiah of Davidic lineage. Next, we move to Isaiah 53. This passage describes a suffering servant who will be pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. He will bear our sins and make us righteous. 53 verse 1. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender plant, and like a root out of a dry ground. He had no form, and he had no majesty that we should look at him, and had no attractiveness that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by others, and a man of sorrows, and familiar with suffering, and like one from whom people hide their faces, and we despised him, and we did not value him. Surely he has borne our sufferings, and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken, and struck down by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities, and the punishment that made us whole was upon him, and by his bruises we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned, each of us, to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, as a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. From detention and judgment he was taken away, and who can even think about his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living, he was stricken for the transgression of my people. Then they made his grave with the wicked, and with rich people his tomb, although he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet the Lord was willing to crush him, and he made him suffer. Although you make his soul an offering for sin, and he will see his offspring, and he will prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will triumph in his hand. Out of the suffering of his soul he will see light, and find satisfaction. And through his knowledge his servant, the righteous one, will make many righteous, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore will I allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life to death, and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he bore the sins of many, and made intercession for their transgressions. Isaiah 53 tells us of a suffering servant who will be killed. This Messiah will bear the sins of everyone, and through his suffering and blood will we be saved. This is a stark difference from the other Messiah who will rule with justice and righteousness, and his reign will be everlasting. Yes, there are several ways to interpret this, however. It seems pretty clear that there is a difference between these two Messiahs. Some people believe that these three passages refer to three different people. The first to the Messiah who will come to rule, the second to the Messiah who will come to suffer, and the third to the prophet Elijah who will come to prepare the way for the first Messiah. Others believe that the first two passages refer to the same person, the Messiah, who will come both to suffer and to rule. They argue that the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 is not a separate person from the messianic figure in Isaiah 9 verses 6 to 7, but rather a different aspect of the same person. They point to the fact that Isaiah 53 verses 10 to 12 says that the suffering servant will see his offspring, prolong his days, and prosper in the will of the Lord. This suggests that the suffering servant will not be destroyed in his suffering, but rather will be victorious and exalted. Could it be possible that the suffering servant would have children, and this would prolong his lineage? And that from that lineage another Messiah would be born to rule? I would think this would be the more likely scenario, as we see in the case of Yahshua or Jesus being resurrected, in which he would have the ability to see his offspring. The different descriptions of the Messiah in Isaiah. Isaiah 9 verses 6 to 7 describes the Messiah as a powerful and victorious king, while Isaiah 53 describes the Messiah as a suffering servant. These two descriptions seem to contradict each other, which has led some people to believe that they refer to two different Messiahs. The Jewish tradition of the Messiah ben David and the Messiah ben Joseph. In Jewish tradition, there is a belief in two Messiahs, the Messiah ben David, who will be a victorious king, and the Messiah ben Joseph, who will be a suffering servant. This tradition is based on the different descriptions of the Messiah in Isaiah, as well as other passages in the Hebrew Bible. There is also some evidence to support the idea that Isaiah prophesied about a prophet. In Isaiah 42 verses 1-9, God speaks about a servant who will be a light for the nations and will proclaim justice to the nations. This servant is often identified with the Messiah, but it is also possible that he is a separate figure. And Isaiah 41 verses 1-9 read as follows. 1. Be silent before me, coastlands, and let the peoples renew their strength. Let them come near, then speak together. Let us approach for a ruling. 2. Who has roused victory from the east and summoned it to his path and delivers nations before him and brings down kings, and makes their swords like dust, their bows like wind-driven chaff. 3. And he pursues them and travels on safely, by a way that his feet had not known. 4. Who has acted and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. 5. The coastlands have seen and are afraid. The ends of the earth, together, they have drawn near and come. 6. They all help their neighbor. They say to each other, take heart. 7. The carpenter encourages the smith, and the one who smooths with the hammer encourages the one who strikes the anvil. He says of the soldering, it is good, and reinforces it with nails, so that it cannot loosen. 8. But you, Israel my servant, Jacob whom I have chosen, seed of Abraham my friend. 9. You whom I encouraged at the ends of the earth and called from its corners and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you, and I have not rejected you. It is important to note that the doctrine of two messiahs and a prophet is not a core doctrine of Christianity. There are many Christians who do not believe in this doctrine, and who believe that the New Testament teaches that there is only one Messiah, Jesus Christ. John 1 verse 21. This passage describes John the Baptist as a prophet who came to bear witness to the light, so that all might believe through him. John 7 verses 40-52. This passage describes a division among the crowd over Jesus, some saying that he was the prophet and others saying that he was the Messiah. Acts 3 verses 19-21. This passage quotes Peter as saying that Jesus is the prophet who was raised from the dead, and that the heavens will receive him until the time comes for the restoration of all things. Some people believe that these passages support the idea that John the Baptist was the prophet who was to come before the Messiah. They also believe that the passages in John 7 verses 40-52 and Acts 3 verses 19-21 suggest that Jesus was seen as both a prophet and the Messiah. Matthew 16 verses 13-17. In this passage, Jesus asks his disciples who they think he is. Peter replies, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus then blesses Peter and says that he has built his church on this rock. This passage suggests that Jesus is the Messiah, but it does not say that he is the only Messiah. John 14 verses 16-17. In this passage, Jesus promises his disciples that he will send them the Helper, the Spirit of Truth. The Spirit will teach them all things and remind them of everything Jesus has said. This passage suggests that the Spirit will play a significant role in the end times. Some Christians believe that the Helper in John 14 verses 16-17 is the Messiah ben Joseph. They argue that the Spirit will come to prepare the people for the second coming of the Messiah ben David. It is important to note that the New Testament was written by Christians who believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Therefore, it is not surprising that the New Testament would support the view that Jesus is the Messiah. However, the New Testament does not explicitly say that there are one or two Messiahs. In conclusion, there is some biblical support for the theory that Isaiah prophesied two Messiahs and a prophet, but there is no clear consensus on this issue among scholars or theologians.